Hello and welcome to the second part or the second topic of our human rights subject. And we're going to continue from where we stopped last time. We mentioned that human rights are divided into three generations based on the work of Karel Vasek. There are some people who go to a fourth generation, and I will mention something about that. I don't want you to pay much attention to that one because the main focus is on the three generations. As a recap, human rights are rights that are inherent to all human beings, wherever our nationality, place or residence, sex, color, religion, language, sexuality, and so forth are. It doesn't matter. We are all human beings and we have got equal rights, or at least we are entitled to claim those rights. So, when Karel Vasek was looking at these human rights and trying to think of them in those generations, we mentioned that the first one he identified as the first generation of human rights. The rights that have got an origin in European history for the struggle for human rights, especially in things like the Magna Carta, the French Revolution, and you could probably add the American Revolution, where people are claiming their rights, moving away from the divine rights of kings, which gave them absolute rights over people. The second generation of human rights, they are the next step, and they mainly arise from the democratic and socialist movements following the Second World War. They focus on the socio-economic as well as cultural rights. And that happened because people could see that even if people have got basic rights, like the right to vote and so forth, still the welfare of the people may not be achieved by that. The third generation of rights is regarded as the solidarity rights, and these are human rights that don't belong to individuals but belong to groups or communities. Some people have been trying to go into fourth or even fifth generation of rights. These are not well defined, but they basically refer to rights that not only don't belong to groups or communities, but they belong to the entire humanity. Take for example the human genome. That doesn't belong to any particular group, but belongs to everyone. Say things like space. The space doesn't belong to any particular group or any particular country. So if we had to have rules and regulations that refer to the space, then they would come under this sort of generation. The same with the rights that belong to future generations that are not here yet. That again, and I mean actual human generations rather than generation of rights, that would be covered by that kind of fourth generation right. Okay, if we can move on from that, I think we can try to go into more discussion on that now. Let's go back to where we started, the first generation of rights. Karel Vasek was working on this around 1979. So the concept of the three generations, he looked at them as aligning with the French Revolution slogan of liberty, equality, and fraternity. And that also corresponds to the colors of the French flag, with the blue being the one for liberty, and white for equality, and red for solidarity. Now, the first generation of rights then are their political and individual freedoms that most people understand as human rights. So when you hear a country saying, oh, we have got a very good human rights record, all they mean is that they observe the first generation of human rights. And within the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, you can identify them from Article 2 to 15. They are also described as negative rights, which can be a little bit confusing, but by negative it means that they are not rights where the government is required to do anything. These are rights that we are assumed to have, and therefore the role of the human rights here is to restrict the government from encroaching on those rights that we are assumed to already possess naturally. That's why they are referred to as natural rights. So, for instance, if you look at Article 5, it says no one shall be subjected to torture. In one of the poems that I've always liked is one by Martin Niemöller that is based on that concept that if we have to have rights, we must protect them. And if the rights belong to everyone, then surely everyone has got a responsibility to protect those rights, not just for themselves, but for everyone else as well. So Martin wrote this poem, which I'll read for you. It said, first, they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. That, to me, speaks volumes about the way we often don't take much interest in what's happening to other people until the reality hits home that we are our brother's keepers. Now, moving on, the second generation of rights now tries to go beyond those civil and political rights and says the government should not just be restrained from interfering with your rights, but they should take positive actions to ensuring that those rights are realized. So the objective then is to ensure that everyone has got an adequate standard of living, but it does put a caveat there that is based on the resources of their country of residence. So, for example, in Article 25, we have everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care and necessary social services. So you can see these are the sort of rights that the social democratic as well as socialist and trade unions movements were fighting for, arguing that people need these rights, the rights to health, the right to education, right to housing. So all these are covered in this particular generation of human rights. If we move on to the third generation of rights, often referred to as collective or solidarity rights. The emphasis here is that everyone should have the right to enjoy the achievements of humanity, so that it's not just some countries that live in wealth and others live in poverty. And I think this has been the major driving force in forming the Millennium Goals, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals that have been developed by the United Nations, that oblige the wealthier nations to assist the poorer nations to achieve some basic standards of living. So under this third generation of rights, everyone is entitled to a social and international order in which human rights can be fully realized, according to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, from Article 28 to 30. So because these rights belong to groups as well as communities, it means that there is need for cooperation in order for them to be realized. Say, for instance, when you talk about the right to enjoy good environment, that's not something that an individual can do. In fact, it is not something that isolated communities can do. It's something that requires greater cooperation and, if possible, cooperation at the international level. And that's why you have had conferences like the Paris Conference to talk about how the world can work together to ensure that we save our planet from climate change. So that is what I've got for you. And what I would want to see you doing is try to reflect on what this means, what it means to have the human rights divided into these different categories, while at the same time we talk of them as being indivisible. The other thing that I would like you to think about is if we have got human rights clearly enshrined in the various covenants and declarations, how come we still continue to have them abused by all different countries? And the other question is, why is it that the Western countries are concerned so much with the first generation of human rights, but not so much the second and the third? And the other question for you is, if the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says, for instance, that we are entitled to housing and so forth, how come you can't go to your government here and ask for housing as a right? And what you're going to find is that there needs to be what is called domestication of these rights. So for most of the rights in the first generation, they have been domesticated in that we have got rules that give you those rights within the country. You can't be tortured, or at least if you are, then you could go to court. Whereas you couldn't go to court on an issue like housing, and that's precisely because the government has not taken that next step of making those articles of the Universal Declaration or the ICAC, International Covenant on Economic, social and cultural rights, those rights have not been translated into Australian law, which makes it much harder to claim. Yes, the government does to continuously report on progress, but as long as it is not made into law, it becomes much harder to claim. Thank you very much.